am the Campus and Community Engagement Librarian at Northwestern University. I'm also a member of the ULS Academic Outreach Committee, which hosts these roundtables on issues around outreach in academic libraries. Today's session is on advocating for outreach. There's lots of different ways that we talk about advocacy in libraries, but the purposes for today's discussion, we're going to be talking about it around the frame of how we as librarians focused on or tasked with library outreach efforts advocate for those programs, materials, as well as budgets or staffing to support those efforts. So before we get started, I'd like us to go around the room and just kind of introduce ourselves as who we are and where we work. Jason, why don't you go? You're right there.
Hi, I'm Jason Cruz. I'm the undergraduate engagement librarian at Northwestern University, and I'm sitting directly across from Chris in the same room. So yeah, that's it.
And Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Park. I'm the Access Services and Outreach Librarian at Mount St. Mary College, which is located in upstate New York.
And Laura?
Hello, I'm Laura Wilson. I am the Outreach Librarian at College of the Holy Cross, which is in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Great. So kind of kicking off, with the focus on outreach and advocating for outreach, what talking points, general or specific, do you believe are most important for stakeholders to know about what library outreach does? It's a small group, so jump right in.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, it was really long. I'm trying to write it down.
Actually, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy them and I'll put them in the chat box. What do you, like when you're thinking about advocating for outreach, what talking points do you believe are most important for stakeholders to know about what outreach does for the library?
I think it's important for our stakeholders to know that outreach helps our users understand the services that we offer as well as the resources that we have, because we have so many things in our libraries that I think even sometimes the staff isn't aware of on some levels. So I think stakeholders need to understand that with outreach, we're getting the word out to our students, our faculty, the staff on campus about what we can offer.
Jen, how about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with Laura. And then just jumping off of that, we do a lot of assessment. I mean, not enough, but you know, we're doing what we can and we need to grow that. Right? It's never enough, and that's fine. And so I think it's always nice to then also bring to the table the numbers about how, you know, as I'm advocating for outreach, because we've done X, Y, Z in outreach, how has it affected these other numbers? And what's the analysis of these numbers? And how it becomes, you know, filtered into that big picture of not just the mission of the library and the vision, but also that of the college and the greater community. So I think that's pretty important, that it's, you know, it's this domino effect. It's not like a standalone thing.
Excellent point. And I think that's actually one of the things that in other conversations that we've done in outreach that a lot of places really kind of like struggle with doing is tying that assessment to the outcomes in other areas. I'd love for you to talk more about how you do that. We need to do a roundtable on assessment of outreach, right? I already snuck into the next question on accident. But so when it comes to funding outreach at your institution, what falls into the categories of outreach and marketing? And then like the follow-up question is like, how does your institution handle the budgeting in those areas?
So at my institution, I'm in charge of the outreach and marketing budget. So I'm given a lump sum. And what I do is I make a spreadsheet with all of our different events that we're planning to do over the course of the year. And the outreach portion of the budget really goes towards the supplies, the swag that we're going to give away at different events, any kind of speaker fees or things like that. And then marketing is a subset of that outreach budget where I will plan for, okay, we're going to spend this much on posters, we're going to spend this much on flyers, etc. And then I'm fortunate enough where if I exceed my budget, like I did last year, I can go to library administration and ask for a little bit more, where I'll just have to justify, oh, we're planning to do this additional thing and we need an extra $80 or something like that. So that's how it works here.
You guys, Laura, do you have like a team that you work with, or is it just you that's like really overseeing everything?
I work with the outreach and engagement team, so I oversee the team, and we're the ones who plan our events and how we're going to market them, as well as marketing our services. How about you?
So I'm kind of like a standalone person. But I've tapped into our students for like ideas and like what they would want to do. Sorry, my light tends to turn off if I don't move. So you'll see me wave my arm. I don't oversee our budget. So we're very small. Let me start with that. We only have 5 full-time librarians. And that's why like I have like multiple responsibilities, but I feel like, you know, a lot of librarians are in that boat. But I don't oversee our budget. It's mostly, I just advocate to my director why we need a certain amount of money. Like, what's the purpose of it? Was I able to get a co-sponsorship for it? Does it relate to, like, you know, many different groups on campus, whatever the case may be? So, I'm sorry, I'm just reading the question.
It's like, we're our next question, so this is great.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm like the outreach and the marketing. However, if I feel that an event is too large or important for my marketing skills, because I don't have a strong marketing background, I'm sort of in that group of learning as I'm going. I will reach out to our marketing department for that assistance. So it's kind of this funny thing, like, but we're on such a small campus that I don't want to say it's like, you know, it's group work in a sense. So yeah.
Jen, when you say marketing department in this case, are you talking about a library marketing department, or are you talking about the campus marketing department?
No, I mean the campus marketing department. In terms of the library marketing department, we don't have one. It's actually, so I started in my position 2.5 years ago. And before that, we didn't have a librarian or anyone on staff dedicated to marketing. It actually fell to our library director, who has, you know, a lot of director duties, obviously. And, you know, to make posters is like another thing for her to do. So what I was brought on in that role of being the person that oversees all the marketing of the library. So website updates, digital signage, signs, posters, and all of that stuff. But having said that, like, I have no idea how much we have spent in those areas, to be honest. Like, until I'm told to stop doing something, and that hasn't happened yet because I'm aware that things cost money. So I don't overdo it or try not to. I'm just going to keep on going.
So how does that, you know, thinking about how money works, then how does that work for you? Like, so you don't have a budget. Like the follow-up question was like, how much input or control do you have over your budget, or how much you can spend? In your situation, what do you, how do you handle that? Like, So to give a little kind of like context, like for how we handle outreach and marketing in our institution is marketing and outreach are actually separate. We have a marketing department, which we rely on. We used to rely on quite heavily for producing things like flyers and whatnot. And actually they have a graphic designer that they contract to for creating certain things that we can't. It's like, we need something that looks nicer than what we can do, and we rely on them for that. But from an outreach perspective, the events and sort of things, we used to have to essentially say every time we wanted to do something, we would have to go to the administration and say, we would like to do this event. And we would advocate for it with, like a proposal, goals, et cetera, and we would be given a budget for that particular thing. And we did that for a good, well, I'd say 5 or so years, 6 years. And then the department then created, I think, shifted more into the way you're looking, or your model, Laura, which is, we have a budget for we have a budget, it's a lump budget, but then it's actually broken out into how much these regular events generally tend to spend. So we can spend that as we like, but when we were in the previous area, we tried to be very conscientious of how much we're spending and tracking all of that. So my question, I guess, to you, Jen, is when you don't have a budget, how do you handle, spending? How do you handle like communicating how you're using that money? Especially if you're in a situation where I feel like I've been in the same place where, like, yeah, yes, you can do this. Yes, you can do this. But making sure that you're showing, like, this is how we're spending this money. This is why we're spending this money. And this is what we as a library are getting out of it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I try to look for a lot of co-sponsorships in order for us to not spend a lot of money. I should also backtrack and say that in terms of our outreach, there wasn't someone before me. And so we're kind of learning how much it costs to put on programs and do things like that. When there's something that I would like to do, I will write up a proposal, unless it's not very costly, like a very small, outreach engagement that's not time consuming and not costly at all. But I'll write up a proposal with my reasoning behind why I want to do it and how it aligns to certain outcomes and goals of, for example, we have a first year experience program. So a lot of my events that I've created align with those goals and outcomes. And so I kind of just go to bat as to why it's important to hold this program, how it aligns with those goals and outcomes. And then we see how it goes and if it's worth repeating that program. Sometimes it's not worth repeating. We don't get that turnout. In other cases, like we've learned that students don't want a full lunch. Like if you're going to do food, they don't want to come in and have sandwiches and stuff like that. They're fine with snacks, like things like that. That makes us more money aware. But it's really our director who oversees all the money. I will say most of my programs, unless there's an honorarium involved, most of my programs cost less than $50. And that's more so for food than anything else. But in the event of honorariums, I'm usually looking for co-sponsorships and for people to split that and split the work and stuff like that.
Quick context question for both of you. What's the FTE of your institutions? Because a lot of times, of course, that also affects.
Yeah, so ours is 2,200.
2,200?
Yeah.
Okay. Laura?
Ours is just under 3,000.
Okay. So you're roughly in kind of a similar boat. I want to shift the same kind of question that I asked Jen to you, Laura, which is like, as you're spending this money, you have a budget, right? That you can use as you see fit. Hi, Gloria, welcome.
Hi.
How are you advocating or like saying this is why we need this money and this is how we're spending this money?
So when I talk about this is how we're spending this money, I haven't had to have that discussion with the library director. I do discuss that with my direct supervisor, who's the head of our reference department. And I share my Google Sheet with her that has our budget. So at any time she can see my exact line of, we spent this much on posters for this event. We spent this much on donuts for our Halloween event. We spent this much on punch. So I have a very granular budget, so she can see exactly how much was spent on each item for each event. And I'm sorry, the first part of your question? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. I'm gonna mute myself. I don't know if I'm lagging.
Oh, I'm sorry, I had my mic muted apparently.
Oh.
The advocacy side. So you're tracking the information. Like, how do you, or do you have those conversations with your director, or does your director ask you those questions about, you know, how you're spending, why you're spending? Right.
Yeah. So the director hasn't asked me directly how we're spending, why we're spending. He might have that discussion with my supervisor, and she might discuss with him our goals for outreach. When I introduce the idea of a new event to my supervisor, I'll certainly give her the justification that myself and the outreach team have come up with for why we think this event is a good idea. And she's very supportive, so she'll say, okay, try it. And just like Jen, we also look for campus partners, and we really try to keep in mind, why is this program relevant? Why are students going to want to take time out of their busy schedules to come to this event? And usually we're trying to make a big effort to collaborate with as many different departments as possible, because we realize that hosting our own standalone events sometimes isn't the best idea for fitting things into student schedules.
Okay, so that kind of that gives me a little more insight into how this is working for you. So from the advocacy side, if you come up with that program, what is the process? So you have like, is it an assistant director, or is it a department head that's above you? And you advocate to them and they make the choice?
So I would say, yeah, it's not like she, so it's the department head, my direct supervisor. I will pitch the idea to her, but it's not like I have to necessarily ask permission. It's just saying, hey, we were thinking of doing this. And pretty much, she's never said, no, that's a bad idea, or no, I don't think that's gonna work. She will give insight into, have you thought of this? Maybe we should add on something like this. But I've been fortunate enough where I have a big enough team where we can really think about things regarding advocating and making a case for why we should be holding an event where we've had pretty much 100% support to do whatever we've wanted to do.
That's a nice position to be in, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Gloria, welcome. I want to pull you into this conversation too. We've kind of been talking about obviously advocating for outreach. You can see kind of the questions that we have up in the front. When we're talking about advocacy in this situation, we're specifically talking about how do we advocate for, as outreach librarians or librarians who are focused on outreach activities and programs, how do we advocate for those programs? Who do we advocate for them to? How do we advocate for budgets? How do we advocate for people? Can you give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are and where you work, and maybe some of your approaches to some of the questions that we've kind of already lined in? Still there, or are you there twice? I'm getting a little echo. Okay, Gloria might be having some technical difficulties. We did introduce the idea of assessment. Let's talk about assessment. What information do you gather around these sorts of efforts, and how do you utilize them when you're then kind of pushing that information out, the importance and impact of outreach?
So our assessment previously, well, and it still is mostly, but it's simply head counts. But now that we've had a couple of years of trying out different programs and different times of the year, or different times of the semester, different times of the day, different days, we're now really able to look at what has worked in terms of days and times and what hasn't worked. For example, I had a program, it was like the second week of the fall semester, and it was greatly attended. So I said, this is awesome. Second week of the semester works. And then I had the same program scheduled for the spring semester, second week, and attendance was like abysmal. It was awful. I said, okay, so it's great for the fall. And then it allowed me to really see whether or not it was the content that was non-relevant, you know, in the spring semester. I'm sorry. I know, it's my life. And stuff like that. It also allowed me to look at how much money we're spending on programs such as those. Because not only are we assessing the head count, but we're also assessing what's spent in terms of food and how much is left over or what wasn't touched and so on and so forth. So it's allowed us to really take a hard look at where we can cut costs a little bit, as well as, you know, what interests the students, like what are they looking for? Oh yeah, and how did you report that out, and to whom? I'm sorry. So I report it to my director, and that goes into a spreadsheet. We actually keep track of the number of attendees for our annual reports, because of course we want to be growing our attendees, but we also want to make sure that if we're growing our number of programs held, that we're also growing the attendees, not that they're saying the same if we're growing the number of programs held. So that also provides us with some insight as to where to go.
Great. Laura?
I would say that our assessment of outreach is kind of in its infancy right now. We had definitely been keeping headcount stats, and I don't think we had any kind of official thing that we did with our headcount stats. It was just like my team and I would do a wrap up of each event, and we'd talk about our different ideas. And in our meeting notes, I would make note of our attendance headcounts, and I'd report that back to my supervisor. And I think it was just kind of spread through word of mouth through the staff amongst the library. Oh, did you hear there were 30 people who attended that author talk? That's pretty great. But we didn't do anything with the stats beyond that I'm aware of. However, last semester we just started distributing a feedback survey at each of our events. And that had been something that I had shied away from in the past because I had figured that nobody would want to take the survey. I had heard that other people at other institutions didn't have great luck with getting people to take the survey, so I thought it would be a waste of time. However, I had a colleague who held an event for Open Access Week, and she distributed a survey, and I was really surprised to see how many students and faculty members filled out the survey. So I thought we should start that with our regular outreach events as well. And we've had pretty good luck getting people to fill them out. We ask some basic questions where students can just fill in a multiple choice circle where what class year are you and how did you hear about the event? So we're asking, did you hear about the event from posters, from flyers in your dorm, through social media, et cetera? And that question is to help us understand what advertising channels are working for us and where we should focus our advertising efforts. And we're also asking open-ended questions of how could we improve this event, to see their thoughts on what we could do for improvement. And a lot of times students are saying the event's perfect, but other times they'll give some really good feedback on things that we should do in the future. And we are also asking, how do you improve the event, and what other events would you like us to do in the future? So that's giving us ideas for things that the students want to see us do as well. And we've done that for the past 2 events that we've done, and it's been really great. And we're looking to do that again this semester as well.
Do you have a plan for what something to do with that feedback that you've collected?
For now, my colleague who's the assessment librarian and I were planning to do a poster proposal for one of the conferences on just how we've revamped our evaluation of the program. But in terms of in our library context, I would say we're just taking a look now to see, are we marketing in the correct places that the students are looking at? And we're also taking the students' suggestions for events and improvements into consideration and reworking that into our plans for our future outreach events.
Gotcha.
Gloria, so we're definitely
you,
trying to be responsive.
Sorry. Gloria,
Okay.
Are you still there? Are you able to talk?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Well,
okay.
Welcome.
I'm here. Thank you. I'm having some problems with the video, but I'm here. I can talk.
Do you perchance have bring over your microphone?
No, I had my IT people in here, and I don't think so.
Okay, no problem. It just also the image looks like when I have my Post-it note over my camera, and I always forget about that when we start these. I'm like, why can't I? Oh, that's right.
Let me see. There is a note here.
There you are.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. What happened?
Or there you were. There you are.
Okay, I'm here. It's not. Okay, let me see if I can. All right, I think. All right, I'm okay. I think.
So where do you work, Gloria?
I'm at San Diego State University, and
Oh.
I'm in outreach here, and I also do a lot of liaison to 5 departments and special student populations like the athletic department, veterans here on campus. We have a pretty large veteran population, international students, EOP, Summer Bridge. I introduce library hour services and resources to those groups as well.
So how does your institution handle outreach from a structural financial perspective, like
I
budgeting?
plead. It's on an event base. So like we have sort of like the campus open house, and we participate in that as the library. And I had to, actually 3 years ago, I asked for a budget so we could kind of give away things. We had the Amazing Race as a theme. And so they would come to the library, go into different stops and have stamps, they would get a passport and have the passport stamped. And when they completed, there were 5 different points of service that we wanted to highlight. And once they got all those points, they entered a drawing, and my dean provided money for speakers. That was the big gift. And then we had a, what do you call those? Oh gosh, bottles, hot, cold, I forgot what you call them. And then we had, what else was it? It was 3 gifts. And so we just raffled those, a camera, and we just raffled those gifts off
So what's the process that your institution goes through for funding these things? How do you advocate for the money to do something like this?
Well, the first year I asked for money, I was asked, was I making a difference? How do I know what's going on? So from that point, we did an assessment. Once they completed that second year, once they completed their points of interest during the race, they had to fill out a little assessment as to what they learned at each point and how they felt the experience was. And so then at each stop, we just did like a basic hashtag count of how many people participated. And then I had some numbers to give her as to how many were in the library who actually participated. And then from that, and also they gave, they talked about the experience, and all of it was really, really positive. And so from that point on, I had no problem getting money. So I've been giving away gifts for the last 2 years. And I must say it really helps with the numbers when they know that there's something attached to the experience. Of course, we want it to all be about the library, but it doesn't actually work that way.
Well, I think I would argue that it's still about the library. There's just varying levels depending on the outreach activity of it's about in the library. Sometimes it's about the library's profile. It's about learning. Sometimes it's about creating a welcoming space. Sometimes it's about, actual information literacy skills. It just depends on the event and the activity. They all have value. Right. I was thinking while you were talking, Laura, about what do we do when we collect this information, because I think we've always been at Northwestern in a very similar situation where we haven't really struggled with having to advocate. Our administration believes in these things, and it's a very comfortable position to be in. But I'm always waiting for that moment where this has been great, but now we need to see some evidence, and we have to start making hard choices. So we've always been very kind of conscious of making sure we're collecting this information, even though we never really had to do anything with it. And we've kind of moved in this last year to a place where we're starting to now write reports on all the outreach activities we do, just to get in the habit of that for the moments when that comes. Maybe we get a new dean, maybe we get a new AUL, maybe we get a new department head, and they don't know why we've been doing this. And even though I think, we hear a lot from our assessment people of don't collect data if you're not going to do something with the data. But I kind of feel like that's an important thing to do. Even if nobody's asking for it, it's good practice to collect that information and kind of write varying levels of reports of feedback, so that people can, if somebody does ever ask, you can say, well, here, and here's 5 years worth of information about how many people have been attending this, why we did it, and what they got out of it, and how we met those goals. So that's just a thought to keep in mind.
What do you put on the information in the report? What kind of information?
It really depends on, and this is something that we're still creating. It just actually started out of one event that we did, which was right out of the box. So it was a case where we were doing an orientation for international students, and we had to write a proposal for it to get a budget for it, because it didn't fall in our traditional outreach budget because it was completely new, so there was no funding planned for it. And so as a product of that, we then wrote a report that addressed what the goals that we stated were and how we met those goals, what the attendance that we expected was and what the attendance actually was. We built into that event opportunities for feedback. We surveyed all the international students that came, and we got a 25% response rate. And so we were able to include that into that. And so we kind of use that as our big, so that was actually a big report. But but like things like exam relief are probably going to be small reports where we're mostly talking about, like you addressed, how did they hear about it, Laura? Ways did they learn about these things? We're doing small feedback on what activities they took advantage of, trying to find ways to get better impact. And the type of activity the report will be is flexible. And then that also then helps us advocate, hopefully in the future, if we need to expand or say, well, you know, we're showing a lot of impact on exam relief, we need a bigger budget. It's really important to students and us so far. I lost my count of my questions. Gloria, how does at your institution, how do they handle the structure for advocating for funding for things? Who do you advocate to?
I advocate directly to my dean.
To your dean
and associate dean. My yeah, if the associate dean isn't willing, then I go to the dean. And sometimes I've had to do that. And she's pretty much a strong advocate for outreach. And she really wants the library to be focused on campus, and she makes it happen.
What about the challenges? I feel like we've had one of those easy conversations where it's like, it's great. I ask and people say yes, and I don't have to worry about it. But what challenges do you encounter as related to advocating for outreach? It might not even be budget. Like, do you run into challenges getting support from other staff? I think as like a lot of us, like Jen, you said, one-stop shop, be technically a one-stop shop originally, and you can't do all of these things by yourself.
Yeah, I will, I mean, it's hard because people aren't aware of really what outreach is if they haven't been exposed to it and the reasoning behind it. And so when I was really new and really gung-ho and let's go team and let's get everyone involved in this one great event, that's where I pretty much learned that I needed to take a step back and really review, like, what do I absolutely need to do? Who truly needs to be involved? Because an event's not going to be pleasant if everyone there doesn't want to be in it. Like, that's another thing. And I think kids and faculty really pick up on that. So that's probably my most major challenge that I have when it comes to just advocating for research. It's just this, I don't want to say it's thinking like, well, it's not my job, but for some people it is, well, it's not my job. So you work with what you got.
So I guess I would tie this into like kind of our early question, even though we focused a lot on finances and advocating with administration, but advocating to other staff. What are the strategies that you utilize to communicate with your colleagues and coworkers about the importance of what these efforts are to bring them into the fold and get them involved?
Yeah, so what I've actually done with any program where I need more assistance than just myself, so I'll write up a full proposal as to why I feel it's necessary, what goals and outcomes are of the program, how they align to any college goals and outcomes. And once it's approved by my director, I send out my email ask for anyone who would be willing to participate. And I include the reasoning why, what are the goals and outcomes. And it could be something as simple as, combating library anxiety to bring students into the library and get them to meet some of the faces. Or it could be more specific to database-specific searching and stuff like that. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. sometimes I need to go around in person and just say, hey, remember that email I sent? Maybe could you possibly, but it's actually also allowed me to refocus my efforts on who I want to be assisting for the programs and events. And so I have found just from some of these walls I've hit that students are actually very happy to take on this opportunity to learn more about the way things are done from the back end of the library, and work programs and events, as long as I feel they are academically able to do it. So it's been interesting how this seemingly negative thing has sort of turned into this positive thing. But that could also just be my perception and my positive outlook. I suppose I could also say it's negative. So, yeah.
Yeah.
What was the question?
Well, it's kind of like two related questions. The initial question is, what challenges do you encounter in advocating for outreach? But as we've had a pretty sunny conversation, one of the things we're kind of circling back to was like budget and administration, about advocating for these efforts with your coworkers to get them involved in these sorts of activities and supporting these activities or even working in them.
Okay, I don't know how many of you are faculty status. So one of the ways a lot of our incoming, especially our newer faculty, and they want tenure or they want something to include in their packet as far as service, they come on board for that reason. And I've been very, I started having full librarians participate. Again, I think it has to do with personalities. It has to do with if they like you as a person and they're going to come on board to help you to succeed in what you do. And that's just been my experience. I had a couple of years, there were only staff people and adjunct librarians. And then for the past 2 years, I've had full librarians and those who've tenured, who've been on board to assist in my programming. So it's been pretty good.
Laura, how about you?
I think that some of the challenges I faced here is that everyone's just so busy. I think people are generally pretty supportive of outreach efforts, but it's just, you know, people have jam-packed schedules and they just don't have time. So I've also kind of followed the same path that Jen mentioned and started tapping our student workers and also student group events, and that's been successful. And I will say too, I did have one colleague in another department who might have been a little more old school in terms of librarianship and didn't really see the point of doing much outreach. I think that person had more of a mindset of they're going to come to us because we're the library, so we don't need to do outreach, and they were already doing their more traditional methods. But I think with that person on our staff, I took baby steps and just took one little project and said, oh, what do you think about this? Let's work together on this. And when that person saw that it was successful and a new idea isn't necessarily so scary, I think that started opening the door and letting that person realize that maybe new school outreach isn't such a terrible thing. And so that was really good.
When you say student groups, who are you referring to?
So for example, with our therapy dog event, this semester I reached out to our campus counseling center, and we actually have a student group on campus that works with them, kind of like peer counselors where students can go talk to another student about their life issues. And so the counseling center put us in touch with that student group, and they were present for our therapy dog event, and they helped market it. And their marketing efforts was really great. And I used those student workers to ask the other students in attendance to fill out our feedback surveys. And we got an incredible amount of surveys filled out because it was the students asking for that feedback. So that's one example. We've also worked with some art groups on campus, different classes, different clubs, the computer science club, things like that.
Actually ties quite nicely to kind of our last question, which is, who are the other stakeholders on campus or in your library that you reach out to kind of help share this burden, this message?
Well, we have a Build It Makerspace lab on campus or in the library. So the librarian, who is our engineering librarian, she does a lot of work. She helps me a lot. And then I am the liaison to our student affairs. So that's when I get our summer bridge students and EOP students. And we're trying to do a sort of like the ALA posters with our athletic department, highlighting the library and having some of the so-called, what do you call the high-profile athletes from the different athletic events. And that's going to be hopefully this year. And I do a lot of community work as well. So we're doing oral histories with African Americans in the community. So that's under outreach here. Our veterans, they started a oral history. And so I'm on the board to kind of talk to them about what has been successful and what has not. Then, of course, the affinity groups, like I am the contact for Black History Month, and some of the other, we have a Cesar Chavez luncheon, and I'm the contact person for that as well. So and with everything, I just try to connect the library. I'll have bookmarks, or I'll have something that highlights the library, maybe our pins I'll take over, so they just know that we are involved.
Jen, you mentioned early on that this is a strategy that you utilize. Are there any kind of key partners that you regularly work with to share the burden?
Sorry, Chris, you broke up a little bit. I think you're asking like which key partners do I play?
Yeah, because you mentioned actually that you utilize this strategy pretty early on in the conversation. I thought maybe you might be able to share some of the people that you tend to.
Yeah, so like a natural partner for a lot of things that we do is our arts and letters department. I'm very close with some of the faculty members there, so it's very easy for me to say, hey, we're having this event, you want to co-sponsor? And then they'll do the same through me because I am the liaison to them. I've also started branching out a little bit more, getting our health services department involved. They actually came to us about co-sponsoring, but they didn't have, this is what I'm finding actually. We're starting to have other departments come to us with co-sponsorship or wanting to co-sponsor, but they don't know what they want to do. And it's kind of been really great to just say, hey, well, we've got this program and it's pretty much in your area. Do you just want to offer, contribute some financial assistance? And it's, generally something not too large. And if it is, then, we make that ask and just see where it goes. So that's kind of one of my goals for the next year, though, is to define who else we can go to that we haven't really worked with yet. So this past year, we did work with Health Services, the Counseling Center, student activities. We did a couple of programs with them, which was new. Arts and Letters, and then we're going to be hosting a conference for the first time this year. And so we're creating it from the ground up. So we have been going to other departments on campuses to see what if they would be willing to offer anything. And we're fortunate we haven't been hit with a no yet. We have been hit with a no, we can't give you that much, but we haven't been hit with a solid no.
I have a question, and maybe you had this before. We have in the library a marketing person, and me is outreach. And the marketing person came on board about 3 years ago. And so our lines are blurred. Like our marketing person is the person who works with our campus as far as during final exams, and she connects with psychology, the counseling psych services to get the support dogs. What do you call them? The
therapy dogs.
Therapy dogs in the library. And there are other things that I used to do so that is, it's not a problem, but it is a concern because like I said, some of and I'm not sure how to get back on track with why I was brought in as outreach.
I can speak to as another institution that also has we have a marketing department. We work very closely with our marketing department. It sounds like the lines in your case are a little more blurred than ours. We just kind of work together on a lot of things. We make sure that they're focused kind of on product, and we focus on the events and activities. And it's not that they're not involved in events and activities. They actually are quite heavily, but like we're kind of the facilitators or we're co-facilitators to these different activities so that we make sure we're kind of focused on the student experience and student reach and student impact, and they kind of support our mission, and that we kind of and branding and maybe messaging. Originally, their focus was predominantly on donor relations and alumni relations, and ours was focused on the other side. And we've been trying to kind of bring each other together because students are future alum. So the relationship is blurred. I think of there a lot, and ever have a problem going into our marketing director's office and sitting down and saying, and for almost all of our major like tentpole events and activities, somebody from the marketing department represents on that task force or that group that plans that event and activity, so that they are involved. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of how we approach it.
Thank you.
So we're over our time. So I do want to wrap things up and thank all of you for joining our discussion today. I hope that you got a little something out of it. I know I did. I got some really good ideas of some new ways to approach things. This roundtable will send out a little email so we can get some feedback from you as we go forward. We're always trying to make sure that we're doing what you need us to be doing, and you're getting what you need to get out of these roundtables. So when that comes through, please give it a little click, and it's a real quick survey. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I will see you all around it at some point in the future. I'm sure of it.